My name is Lewis Potter. My friends call me Lou, but I usually answer with any name. I'm married to Ruby. We have been married for 4 years now, but we do not have children, for the simple reason that we are both a little selfish and do not want to give up our freedom. Perhaps we will have children, but I think that this will happen when we are already well over 30. Both came from poor families, lived just a few streets away from each other, but only met at the age of 18 during a recruitment event held by our college. Ruby did well in college and qualified as an accountant and credit controller. I, on the contrary, studied very poorly and did not even graduate from college. But I have a work ethic and a knack for business. At the age of 15, I started working as a cleaner in local stores and small offices. By the time I was 18, I already employed 30 people and had contracts with a number of large enterprises in our city. Ruby was looking for a job, and I was looking for employees. When Ruby came to my table at the event, we started talking. She handed me her resume and, looking at me, said, "I don't need a cleaning job, but you might be interested in my phone number." I called her before she sat down at the next table and invited her to dinner the next night. 4 years later, we got married. As a result of this event, Ruby found a job. She started working in the purchasing department of an engineering firm, starting at the bottom of the ladder. 8 years later, she became the head of the purchasing department, as well as the credit control department. Needless to say, we lived a very nice dual-income lifestyle with no kids. My business is thriving, and now I have the largest office and store cleaning company in the city, after buying out 2 of my competitors. As in most offices, the cleaner and security guard are the first to notice strange things, and everyone is happy to talk about them. About 4 months ago, I was working in the office when my secretary came and said there was a man in the waiting room who would like to talk to me. She handed me his business card. It said, "Ross Evans, private detective." I told her to bring him to me. When he entered the office, I stood up, extended my hand, and asked, "Mr. Evans, how can I help you?" We shook hands, and I invited him to sit down. Smiling, he sat down. "First of all, can I have some coffee? I haven't drunk it all day, and I would kill for it." I understood exactly how he felt. Caffeine seems to be a drug for most business owners. My secretary didn't have to be asked twice. She poured 2 mugs of coffee from the machine in my office, and milk and sugar were already on the table. None of us touched them. After the small talk, I got down to business. "So, Mr. Evans, how can I help you?" Without wasting any time, he began, "Please call me Ross. As you can see from my business card, I am a private investigator working for a client who suspects that his wife is either having an affair or is about to have one. Our ward works as an accountant at Stevens Piping. One of their largest suppliers is AM Metals. AM Metals has a new salesman named Alistair Clark. Mr. Clark is a bit of a gigolo who likes married women. Clark has been courting my client's wife for quite some time. They have a long lunch, he sends her flowers, writes SMS at night. In general, everything is as it should be. As far as we can tell, he's trying to get her to go away with him for the night. We now have sufficient information, but we need to find out the last details. I was intrigued. The whole secret agent thing is very funny, but the name AM Metals is very familiar to me. Ruby's employers also get their raw materials from them, and this Clark seems like someone I'd want to keep her away from. I looked up and saw Ross looking at me. Apparently, he was waiting for a question, so I asked, "I understand everything, but how can I help?" He smiled. "I was hoping you would ask about this. It's very simple. He leaves flowers, notes, and other documents on her desk. She reads them and then throws them into the trash. Your employees take out the trash. They can take everything personal from him and give it to us. We checked this with our legal service. Everything personal can be seized without any legal problems. We also spoke with her employer. Here is the permission to obtain information. By cooperating with our investigation, they avoid any legal problems related to violating the fraternization clause in her contract that may come their way. If you want to know why they signed it, here's the CEO's business card. Please call him to confirm your agreement." The general director's number was already on my phone. Without saying a word to Ross, I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, and, without even saying hello, immediately began, "Lou, I believe Ross Evans is sitting in your office. I confirm that I give you carte blanche to receive and transmit to him or his employees any information not related to our company. My lawyer is currently preparing a letter to this effect, which we will send to you by email. I have to go now, since the lawyer is now in my office, but call me back if you need anything else." He hung up. I didn't have time to say a word. Obviously, they wanted to get this issue over with as quickly as possible. Ross smiled at me. I just nodded and added, "He confirmed your words. Give me all the information and we'll start emptying her bin into a separate bag. I'll sort it here, and you can pick it up every morning at 11. Will this suit you?" Ross confirmed. "It's perfect." I called the appropriate crew leader and Ross instructed us on what to look for. Early lunches, late lunches, flowers, notes, etc. We worked with Ross for about 6 weeks. At the end of this period, he announced that the investigation was completed. One of my employees noticed that the employee did not return after lunch. We called Ross and told him about it. He followed them to the motel. The marriage ended in divorce. Work and family life went on as usual. Until one day, Ruby came home a little worried. I tried to find out what was wrong, but she didn't tell me anything. About a week later, Donna, one of my long-term employees, came into my office. This is a good employee who has worked with me almost from the very beginning. I considered her my friend. She is 25 years older than me and treats me like a son. She sat down in the chair and I realized that something was wrong. Then she began, "Remember, a couple of months ago I worked in the office where we were following that woman? I was intrigued. How could I forget this?" "Yes, it was a very interesting time. Why did you remember this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow to show that I was certainly intrigued. "Well," she hesitated, "as you know, now I work in the office where your wife works, and the same guy we were watching is now coming into her office. I noticed a large bouquet of flowers, and she went with it to lunch. Here is the card that was in flowers." She handed me the card and I read it. "Dear Ruby, thank you for helping me renew my contract with your company. You have no idea how grateful I am to you. I hope you'll accept my invitation to lunch so we can have a good chat. With love, Alistair." My blood froze in my veins. The language on the card immediately suggested that this was not the first personal interaction, and it was certainly getting close, if not already close, to failing the spouse test. I knew from Ross that this guy takes his time, but is very successful at hitting on married women, and my wife is at gunpoint. I thanked Donna and asked her to keep an eye on everything else and give me a summary every morning. If there were any more notes, I asked her to bring them to me. As soon as she left, I picked up the phone and dialed Ross's number. He answered on the third ring. "Hello, Lou. How can I help you?" I immediately started the conversation by telling him what Donna had told me. "One of my employees just came to see me. She was the one who cleared the table every night for the case you were leading. After the investigation was completed, we transferred her to another position. Now she works in the office where my wife works. Donna just told me that this same Mr. Clark is putting pressure on my wife, and she is now going out to lunch with him. I have a card with flowers that he sent, and it says that he has ambitions for it." Ross took a deep breath. "We are continuing our investigation into Mr. Clark. In fact, you are already the third husband at the moment. The only difference is that the other two did not know who he was from the very beginning. The other husbands agreed to split the expenses. Would you like to join them?" "Of course." "What do I need to do?" I answered. Ross said he meets with their husbands at 2 o'clock and asked, "Could you come to my office to meet? Fill out the necessary documents and share information." I agreed to come. At exactly 1:55 p.m., I was sitting in Ross's office. In the room were Dan McWilliams and Johnny Ashley, 2 husbands. Also with us were Ross and one of his employees, Mike Pearson, who was collecting data on this case. Ross began the meeting by saying, "Gentlemen, we are gathered here because you 3 have the same problem. Dan and Johnny, this is Lou. Lou would like to join your investigation. If you agree, We will register him as a client and draw up documents allowing the exchange of information. They both looked at me, then at Ross, and replied, "Yes, that will be nice." The paperwork took about 15 minutes, after which I used my personal credit card to advance the $5,000, knowing that Ruby would never receive a statement for this payment. Ross began. "So, Dan, Johnny, and Lou, our common problem is called Mr. Alastair Clark. FYI, Lou, Dan's wife, works at AM Metal with Mr. Clark, and Johnny's wife works for the school board, which purchases metals for use in technology classes in schools. Mr. Clark has a well-rehearsed process. He stalks a woman at work with flowers, messages, lunch, and usually tries to get her to go to a motel after lunch. He does the same with women who have children, and usually tries to get them into bed several times. With childless women, he tries to force them to ask their husbands for a free pass. He seems to get real pleasure from the fact that their husbands know that he has managed to win the affection of their wives. He tries to take them away for the weekend and then abandons them. We know that over the past year there have been at least 5 divorces in this area due to his fault. We tracked him down to his previous job, which was in Dallas. In fact, his employer fired him when he was sued in a class action lawsuit by 7 husbands over 3 years for alienation of affection. This guy is a disgusting guy." He took another sip of coffee and continued, "Lou, do you clean at AM Metals or the school district office? Last time we checked, if you empty the contents of your trash can into a bag, you can use the trash as you please, as long as it's not protected by a confidentiality clause in your contract with the company you're cleaning for." I shook my head. "No, we do neither one nor the other," was my answer. Ross nodded. "It's a pity, but continue to collect garbage from your wife's basket. Who pays your wife's phone bill?" "My business," I answered. Ross smiled and asked, "What is her phone number?" "Samsung," I stated for the record. "Fine. Please fill out this document giving us permission to collect data from her phone." Then he handed me a piece of paper with a QR code on it and continued, "Scan this code from her phone. You will be taken to our server. Use the username and password below, and a program will be downloaded to her phone that will transmit all her calls, messages, emails, and even WhatsApp messages to us. We know that he always uses a mobile phone so that when he calls the home phone, his husband does not answer by mistake." The meeting ended with Dan, Johnny, and I exchanging phone numbers, and we created a WhatsApp group that included Ross and Mike. This way we could quickly exchange information. When I returned home, Ruby was already there. She was again slightly distracted, holding the phone close to her and not really listening to what I was saying. She went out to feed the dog, and I noticed that she took her phone with her, which she had never done before. When I asked what was wrong, she replied that she had had a strange day and felt very tired. She went to bed at 9:30, 2 hours earlier than usual. I stayed up until our usual time and then went to look for her phone. He was not in his usual place, and I went up to our bedroom. There was a telephone cable next to the bed, and when I looked closer, I discovered that it was under the pillow. It was impossible to get it out without waking her, so I went to bed. All this did not look very good, and sleep was difficult for me. I am lucky. In the middle of the night, she got up and left the room. I quickly grabbed her phone, scanned the QR code, entered the details, and returned the phone to its place before she returned. The next morning, she just wandered around the house until she left for work. If I hadn't talked to her, she wouldn't have told me anything. At about 11:30 in the morning, Mike called from Ross's office. They finished analyzing the first data dump, and he began explaining. She opened a new email address, which apparently only he uses. By the way, this is very convenient for us. We didn't know how he contacted women, so we are now working on hacking his email. Letters from him are actually very hard selling. He made her talk about how you were her first and only, and he told her that she needed to learn new things to keep the marriage fresh and interesting. She told him very personal information about your life, and he, like a sponge, absorbed it and used it to his advantage. He hinted that new sexual experiences would add variety to your life, and must have already suggested spending the weekend together when they had lunch yesterday. Now he backs it up with, "It's just sex," and "If he really loved you." I'm sorry to say, but he moves quickly and attacks fiercely. I talked about her behavior last night and then added, she must have been thinking about it all the time last night and this morning. She didn't even notice me last night or this morning. Then I asked, do they continue to communicate now or do they have lunch planned? Mike looked at the messages and read the last one. This just arrived. Let's have lunch at the beach club tomorrow and make a plan. Liu loves you, and if you tell him, it won't be cheating, and he won't be able to deny you free passage. She just replied, okay. Mike and I ended our conversation, and I sat back, wondering what I should do. You can't just talk to her. He will continue to work on her and resort to another method, taking her to a motel for half a day. No, I have to end this or end our marriage. I called Ross, and after a few pleasantries, I said, looks like he's heading straight for Ruby and wants to rub my nose in it. Even if I kill it, he'll try to take her to a motel. I need a plan to ensure I kill this. I think I need to file divorce papers. I also think I need a plan B, but I haven't figured out which one yet. What do you say? Ross was silent for a few moments, then replied, it's always good to have a plan B, but if it doesn't work, he won't stop. I know this man and his ego won't let her slip away. So if you can't forgive her, then divorce will be a reality at some point. I will prepare a package of documents for your lawyer, or I can recommend my own. I have mine, thank you. He drew up a business agreement, and in the event of a divorce, it is protected by a trust, I replied. I called my lawyer and asked for a meeting. We agreed to meet the next day at 9:30 in the morning. When I entered the lawyer's office, he looked at me. Damn it, who changed it? I smiled. He read me like a book. I sat down, took the cup of coffee his secretary placed in front of me, and began. Ruby is going to cheat on me. A salesman came to her work and fell for her. She bought it, and now I see no other way out. I'm working out a plan B to stop everything, but plan A is a scam if she cheats on me. We spent the next hour discussing possible options. I wanted a clean divorce. The business is protected by the agreement, and everything else is 50-50. There are no children, so child support is not required. The house will be sold. I had no intention of suing Clark, his employer, or her employer. Too expensive and with no chance of success. We shook hands, I paid the fee, and left. He will complete all the documents and keep them in the archive so that if necessary, I can contact him. As the week progressed, Ruby's mood rose and fell. One evening, she could not get enough of time with me and affection. The next, she did not even notice my presence. Donna called Friday afternoon to say Ruby had received a large bouquet of flowers. The postcard read, I made up my mind. How about you? While sending a message to the WhatsApp group, I noticed that Ross posted the following message. Dan, he invited her to dinner at the Holiday Inn. We know that he has a number, but the issue has not yet been resolved. Come here right now, and we can stop this thing. I was happy for Dan. Now, one way or another, he will achieve his goal. I hoped that this moment was already close for me. I was so distracted that new things fell out of my hands. I sent a message to the group telling Mike about the flowers and what the card said. He replied, I'll check her email now. There hasn't been anything yet this morning. About 5 minutes later, Mike called and, without hanging up, said, Look in your WhatsApp. I opened the app and there was a document Mike had sent me. I opened it. It was confirmation of a reservation at a hotel located on a lake about 30 miles from the city. The room was a double for the coming Friday and Saturday, and the booking included 2 names, Clark and Ruby. I returned to the phone and said, Looks like things are bad. Mike sighed. Yes, but the email is even worse. This is a guide for cheaters where Ruby explains how and what to say. I'll send it to you. I thanked him and we hung up. The letter arrived and I read it. These were several letters in a row with the subject, Weekend. It all started about 2 weeks ago when he sent her a link to a hotel, the same hotel he ended up booking. In the letter, he told her how he would like to take her to a hotel to pamper her, and suggested other entertainment. In subsequent letters, I asked what she thought about this, and why I did not allow her to do what would make her happy. In the last letter, he wrote about the reservation, and also gave a list of things to say and do in order for me to agree. This was a guide to preparing for betrayal. It involved cooking a nice dinner the following Thursday. Lots of sex throughout the week, then explaining that it would just be sex with him. But he would teach her a lot. I had a lot more experience before we got married, and ended with the words, "If you really love me." Her answer was evasive, but left the choice up to her. I'm not sure Liu will buy it. Let me think about it. The weekend was spent in hard work. I couldn't say anything about what I knew, but she was incredibly sweet. We had sex on Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night. On Sunday, she took me to bed in the middle of the day, again on Sunday evening, and on Monday morning, we had quick sex. Ross called at 3 o'clock on Monday with an update on the email. The news is bad. She just texted Clark and said she'll offer it to you Thursday night. If you refuse, she won't do it, but if you agree, she will. He replied, "If he becomes nervous, then remember that asking for forgiveness is easier than asking for permission." I thanked Ross and asked him to prepare a folder with everything we had. He asked if they had photographs of them in an intimate setting. I heard the rustling of papers and he answered, "We have a photograph of them kissing. Not a passionate kiss, but a kiss nonetheless." I said, "Fine. Please put everything in a folder and let this photo be like the title page on the outside. Also send the entire folder to my lawyer." He confirmed that he would send it. I made the next call to my lawyer. I warned him and told him that he would have a folder later. We agreed that it would be presented at the hotel on Saturday morning during breakfast. Nothing causes indigestion like a divorce petition. On Monday night she wanted sex, but I refused, saying I had an important sentence to finish. I sat in my office and took care of business. I went to bed only at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was already fast asleep. I also slept very soundly, got up at 6 in the morning, and went to work before she could attack me. The folder was delivered by courier. I sat in the office and read it. The seduction technique was visible. She was unpredictable, but clearly effective. Ross gave details, but without names, of at least 7 marriages that he had destroyed in the past 18 months. There was also a note from Dan in the folder. He arrived at the Holiday Inn and joined his wife and Clark at the table. His wife got scared and ran out of the restaurant in tears. Ross had to intervene to stop Dan from attacking Clark and then drove him home. He and his wife began counseling to see if they could save their marriage because they have 3 children under the age of 8. This temporary measure would at least give them time, and his wife left her job, so Clark was out of work. While I was reading, my secretary entered the room. She looked straight at me and didn't say anything. Before I realized what was happening, I started crying my eyes out and told her the whole story. When he finished, she asked, "What are you going to do about it?" For the first time ever, I smiled. I don't know why, but she was no longer my secretary, but a friend who wanted to help. I also noticed something else that I hadn't noticed before. She is very sexy. She smiled back. I said, "Plan A, divorce. If she leaves with him on Friday, she will file for divorce at the hotel on Saturday morning. No second chances. I've been trying to come up with a plan B to get her to stop, but my head is so foggy I can't think of anything." My secretary, whom I always addressed as Miss Atwood, but who called herself Kathy, smiled slyly and recited, "What is good for the goose is good for the gander. Why don't you have your own weekend with the girl of your dreams?" Unable to resist, I smiled back and asked, "And with whom should I arrange this?" I knew the answer before she said it, but she answered anyway. "With me, of course. Your trusty secretary is pestering you, and you just have to get it out of your head. It will only be sex and nothing to do with your marriage. Take this letter as a template and unleash it on her before she unleashes it on you." It was brilliant in its simplicity, but it would also force Ruby to confront her own betrayal. On Tuesday night, I fucked my wife, without any love. This was hard. On Wednesday morning, neither of us was ready for a quickie. On Wednesday evening, things were a little less stormy, but only a little. On Thursday morning, Ruby woke up as I was leaving the house. She shouted something about dinner, but I deliberately ignored her. Around noon on Thursday, Ross called me and said that Ruby had texted Clark that she was cooking a big dinner for me and would let him know how the conversation went. I wanted to preempt her, so I went to the store and bought chicken, potatoes, and vegetables, all of which I planned to bake, as well as a bottle of her favorite white wine. At 2:30, I was already home, and 2 hours later, everything was ready and in the oven. Just as I was putting the potatoes in to bake, Ruby came through the door with shopping bags. She looked at me in confusion and asked, "What are you doing?" I smiled widely. "I'm just preparing dinner for my beloved wife. I wanted to do something special, and then we needed to talk." I saw a strange expression on her face. Clearly surprised, she replied, "Oh, I was going to cook dinner, but after we finish we can talk, because I have something important to say, so it's going to be a long evening." I answered, "Of course." But he turned away with a smile on his face. I have already made a significant contribution to her plans. Dinner was tense. I carried on the conversation, and every time she even came close to turning the conversation on me, I pulled him aside, saying, "Let's enjoy this nice meal, and then I'll tell you my big news." When we finished, I spoke first. "Bring your wine to the kitchen, and we can talk there." She followed me. I had previously placed a folder with a letter containing a list of her excuses on the kitchen table where I usually sat, covering it with a couple of magazines. Now I put the magazines away so she could see that I had printed something, but nothing else. I said, "Ruby, you know that I love you and that I would never do anything to hurt you, but we got married very young, and I had so little experience. For the past few months, my new secretary, Miss Atwood, or Kathy as she likes to be called, has been talking to me. She has so many stories that I could listen to her for hours. Now I need to get her out of my head before you and I settle down for the rest of our lives. I booked a hotel with her for the weekend. There will only be sex and a little of my time, to let off steam and learn new tricks that you and I will then play with in bed. This has nothing to do with my love for you and will not affect our marriage. I am telling you this so that you know in advance, and this way it will not become my betrayal. I know that you love me so much that you will allow me to spend this one weekend outside of our marriage, and it will not affect our marriage in any way." Ruby's face turned crimson. It seemed to me that she was about to explode. She then stated, "Only over my dead body, and I want this whore to quit on Monday morning, or we'll break up." This relieved the tension I was in, and I burst into the biggest laugh imaginable, saying, "If you could see your face, it's just a picture." It couldn't be better. At that moment, it dawned on her. Everything I said, she was going to tell me. I closed the folder and handed it to her. On the front was a photo of her kissing Clark. Her face turned almost gray as she whispered, "You knew and you played a trick on me." I smiled. "Yes, I played it. I think your reaction is exactly the same as what I would have if you had caught me off guard. By the way, unlike you, I did not book a hotel for us. And unlike you, Ms. Atwood and I never had lunch, never kissed, and never discussed our love or sex lives. My story is a figment of my imagination, but yours is quite real." While I was saying this, she was leafing through the folder. The extent of my knowledge was a revelation to her. Dates, times, photographs of dinners and intimate moments, copies of her secret emails, transcripts of telephone conversations. Everything was here. She was indignant. "You followed me? You invaded my privacy. How could you do this?" I was calm. "That's all. Time to act or not. I love this woman, but she needs to know that there is a limit, and she is standing right at the line. You got yourself a boyfriend, started an emotional affair, planned to make it physical, humiliating me and destroying our marriage in the process, and yet you're angry at me for trying to stop it?" "I thought we could recover from this, but maybe I'm wrong," I replied, more sad than angry. "What does it mean to humiliate you and destroy our marriage? I didn't plan anything like this. It was something outside of our marriage." Obviously, she started quoting the cheating manual. "Why should this affect us?" "Listen to what you said," I repeated her words, "and then think that you answered me the same thing. You said, 'over my corpse.' So why is it okay for you to cheat, but not for me?" She took a deep breath, as if about to say something. I raised my hand and added, "There is no such thing as a free pass. If you go with Clark, it will be cheating. If you tell me about this in advance, it will not change the situation." She lowered her eyes and then said, "I can't digest this now. I need to be alone." With that last statement, she stood up and ran upstairs. I noticed that she took the folder with her. I heard the bedroom door close and the lock click. I cleaned up the house and sat down at the table. Ross also gave me a tablet computer that I could use to access a server that displayed all of Ruby's phone activity. I sat down and opened it. She corresponded with Clark. I read her first letter with interest. "Oh God, Alistair, he knows. He's been following us and he has copies of the messages. When I got home today, he cooked dinner and told me exactly what I was going to say. I exploded at the thought of him being with another woman. Then he showed me the folder. It contains everything, including the reservation. What should I do?" Clark clearly didn't see this as a problem. He responded a few minutes later. "Just tell him that everything is booked and that you have to do it. Be sure to emphasize your love for him and ask if he loves you as much as you love him. He will understand that you need one weekend." You could almost hear the desperation in what was written. I tried to do this, but he said that it would humiliate him and ruin our marriage. That even if I ask him, it will still be cheating. I cannot do it. Everything must stop. The weekend would be fun, but I can't risk it ruining the rest of my life with Lou. Now he was in despair. All his efforts and money were wasted, and he decided to play big. "Do you think he will divorce you?" "No, he will never find a woman like you. Tell you what, pack your bag and take it to work. Let's see what he does, and if it doesn't work out, let's go for the weekend. And on Sunday, you can ask him for forgiveness. I know the type of husband you have, and he would never want to lose you." It was complete nonsense, but unfortunately, she bought it. The last letter in the chain was, "Okay, but if it even looks like he will leave me, I won't do it. See you tomorrow." She began to think sensibly, and he, of course, knew how to calm her down. I put the tablet away and sat down to watch TV. I didn't really look because my mind was on all this. I scheduled the divorce filing for Saturday. Perhaps I should reschedule it for a later date. But I knew that once I submitted my application, I would not back down. No. Tomorrow I need to do something different that will show her that I'm serious. I called my lawyer and told him everything in detail. "Hey, I just hit her with it." And Clark let her know that I would forgive her. She's going to pack her bag and see what I'll do. I don't want to file for divorce until they sleep together. But is there anything we can do to show her how serious this is? My lawyer was smart. He replied, "We can give her a letter with a preliminary claim. All we will do is state that you know that she is going away for the weekend to have an illicit affair, and that if she continues this affair, we will file for divorce on Saturday morning at the hotel. I'll expand the text a little, but we'll hand it to her in her office, preferably in Clark's presence. What do you say?" It will work. He will be the final proof that I will do this. She said Clark would pick her up at lunch. I think you should give this to her around 11 o'clock. It didn't matter whether he was there or not. Her employer would understand what was going on. He's old-fashioned and won't like what she's doing. But what would upset him the most is if a bailiff came into the office and made a fuss. About an hour later, the lawyer sent me a draft letter. It was perfect for the circumstances. It stated everything we knew and clearly stated that she would be served on Saturday morning. I sent a reply message confirming that I was happy with the project. I checked the tablet, but there were no more messages between Ruby and Clark, so I went to bed. I tried to open the bedroom door, expecting it to be locked, but was surprised to find that it was not. I walked in to find Ruby lying in bed, clearly hoping I'd be romantic. I noticed her packed bag leaning against the wall on her side of the bed and looked at it. "I see you have made a decision. A quickie with Clark was more important than our marriage." I turned and walked out of the room, heading towards the guest room, and heard her get out of bed and scream, "Liu, stop! All wrong! Come back and let me show you how much your love means to me. Please." I didn't answer. I just lay on the bed in my clothes. The letters were written by a third party, not in reality. But the bag, packed and ready to meet another man, was real, evoked emotions, and felt like a knife to the heart. I was not prepared for the grief and sense of loss, and I cried most of the night. The next morning, I heard Ruby coming down the stairs. I went into our bedroom to take a shower and get some fresh clothes and noticed that my bag was no longer there. I wondered if she had taken it downstairs, unpacked it, and put it away. I came out of the shower and smelled coffee and bacon. I guessed that the bag was below. I walked into the kitchen and looked at her. She looked at me, biting her lower lip. The first thought was, "Come on, she's nervous, don't hold back." I guess this feast is an attempt to show me what a wonderful wife you will be if you can sleep with another man. This won't work. If you do this, it's over between us. During the conversation, I decided to lay it all out. The lawyer and I agreed that tomorrow morning at breakfast you will be given divorce papers. I assure you that after delivery I will not withdraw them. There will be no forgiveness. If you come home tonight, we'll start counseling to figure out how to rebuild trust and make sure this doesn't happen again. If you leave with him, don't even think about coming back. You won't be welcome here. I turned to leave. She said, "Please stay for breakfast. We need to talk about this." I turned to her and answered, "We've already talked. Your bag says that you only want to convince me, not talk. I won't have breakfast here. It's time to start learning how to take care of yourself, if you choose to do so. I assume the bag is already in your car?" She turned away. Looks like I'm right. I left the house in silence. At least she realized what an abyss she was looking into. When I arrived at the office, Katie looked at me and said, "You look like shit." I smiled. "And you look as sexy as always." Before you ask, I have no idea how it went. When I offered her plan B, she lost her temper. She wanted to fire you and even said, "Only over my dead body." And then she began to act on her own. This morning, I took my weekend bag with me. Today, at 11 in the morning, she will be given a letter from me with an order. Let's see if this will stir her up. While I was talking, Katie was making coffee. She handed me a cup and answered, "I hope she comes to her senses. She can't be so stupid as to think that this is normal for her, but not normal for you." I smiled sadly and sat down at the table. This day was not productive. Just after 11, my cell phone rang. It was Ruby. I could barely understand her words through my tears. "Are you serious? Are you actually going to divorce me?" Obviously, she convinced herself that I wouldn't do it. I simply replied, "Without hesitation, if you cheat on me. Treason is breaking the contract. We both know it. You'll divorce me if I cheat on you, right?" The answer was so quiet that I barely heard it, but it was a definite yes. She coughed. "Will you come home now to talk?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. That's all I said, hanging up. I came home first and put on the coffee. The smell of bacon she had cooked that morning was still in the air, so I opened the kitchen window before sitting down to eat. She appeared in the house 10 minutes after me. I was already pouring coffee for everyone when she appeared at the door. She had an envelope from the lawyer in one hand and a weekend bag slung over her shoulder. She dropped her bag at the door and froze. I think she wanted to rush to me to hug me, but she didn't know if I would let her. I carried the coffee to the table and sat down, motioning for her to sit down. My first words were a question. "So, are you going to the hotel or not?" "How could you even ask about this after you sent this? Of course I'm not going. I love you. I want to be with you. I know that you will never allow this, so everything is canceled. Now, do we need to fix our marriage or will I still get served?" she asked, sitting down opposite me and resting her chin on her chest. I looked at her and, leaning across the table, lifted her chin so that she was looking at me. I said, "You will only be served if you are at the hotel. No hotel, no service. But our marriage suffered greatly. So this is what will happen. First, in my presence, you will call Clark. I want to hear you tell him that everything is canceled. Then you will disable and delete the personal email you have for his sake. Then you will call your boss, tell him what Clark is doing, and ask that he not be allowed into your office anymore. After this, we will schedule a consultation. We need to figure out why you fell for this, why you think I'll go along with it, and how we can restore trust." Just as I finished speaking, her phone rang. It was Clark. She put the phone on speaker and I heard him ask, Where are you, Ruby? I'm at the reception, waiting for you, and can't wait. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Alistair, I'm home with Lou. He did something that shook me to the core, and if I go with you, my marriage will be ruined. And I'm sorry, you're not worth it. That's why I'm not going. His rage was off the charts. You are a stupid bitch. You know how much effort, time, and money I invested in you. And now you leave when the weakling behaves like an offended child. You are just a dynamo. Fuck you. With these words, he hung up. For the first time, Ruby saw him for what he was, a slime. Deactivating and deleting the mailbox turned out to be more difficult than expected, but it was done within an hour. By the time we finished, her boss was at our door along with the HR manager. HR manager, Mervyn Woods, began by saying, Ruby, we are aware of what happened today. To say we're unhappy is an understatement, but we're here to give you a chance to keep your job. Now tell me what happened. She took a tissue and dabbed her eye before starting. As you know, about 3 months ago, our account was taken over by a new AM Metals sales agent, Alistair Clark. Previously, I was responsible for this account, and he came to me almost every day. I didn't realize it at first, but he started flirting with me, complimenting my dress, hairstyle, and even my smile. Soon, he began to talk about what a beautiful butt I had and what perfect breasts. I bought into it and soon began wearing more provocative clothes. He sent flowers and chocolates and then invited me to dinner. Out of my own stupidity, I went, and he started asking me personal questions about my life, my husband, and eventually my sex life. Soon he began to speak disparagingly about my husband, saying that he was unworthy of me. It was like drop by drop, and he was wearing me down. Then he asked me to go with him for the weekend. Luckily, Liu was alert. He handed me a letter in which he said that he was divorcing me, and I came to my senses. I told Alistair that I wouldn't go, and that my husband and I were developing a plan to save our marriage. I was going to call you and file a formal complaint, so I'm glad you're here. Woods looked at the CEO, who just nodded. Then he spoke. Well, Ruby, we're glad you're willing to be honest. Yes, it was a very big mistake, and you are lucky to still have a job. We have problems with the quality of AM Metals products, so we are closing his account. Thus, Clark will be removed from the office forever. Therefore, we will not take any further action against you. But if you ever do anything like that again, you will be out. Is it clear? Ruby nodded meekly. Yes. They said goodbye to us and left. After they left, we had lunch and then started looking for a consultant. Finding it turned out to be quite easy. We called and made an appointment. She wanted to see us the next day, Saturday. The time was appointed. We sat and looked at each other. After about 10 seconds, I walked over to Ruby, took her hand, and pulled her into bed. We had sex. Then they went to bed, and I fell asleep with my head on her chest. I woke up around 5 o'clock, and we made slow, sweet love for probably the first time since she met Clark. The consultations were successful. Ruby realized that Clark was playing on her fear that our lives would become mundane, and she realized that she had divulged all the information to him that he used to further his plan. I realized that for him it was just a game, and I began to appreciate how good our life was together. We don't need anyone to teach us anything. The consultations lasted 3 months. 4 years later, we are still very happy, and Ruby is pregnant with our first child. As for Mr. Clark, he was at our local shopping center and had a very bad fall while walking down the stairs into the parking lot. Nobody knows how it happened, but there were at least 5 husbands at the mall that day who didn't like him. We all wore the same black clothes with baseball caps, so no one could tell us apart. We all went into the cafe. Then one of us got up, came back, then got up, the other came back, and so on. No one would be able to tell who was sitting at the table and who was not. The police tried to split us up, but no one gave anyone away. I'm sure it was one of us. I swear. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.